Welcome, Sam. Another week's passed. Eat, Sleep, Business by Plus24, podcast number 5. So, quick catch up. How's your week been, Sam?
It's been great so far, yeah. It's busy. I think I seem to say this every week, but more and more people are getting back to some level of normality now. So, like a lot more positive calls with customers and stuff.
Yeah, I think so. We've had some customers that have been slightly less active than before start to pick it up again, and also bringing in some new clients. Loads and loads of software inquiries coming in at the minute. Processes obviously need updating, speeding up processes, automation, that sort of thing. Customer service processes to make sure that everybody's receiving the best possible customer service, because that is going to be crucial.
Last week, obviously.
Yep. So yeah. All in all, fairly positive. But like everything, there's always the ups and downs, I think, and that kind of, we'll jump straight in it today because we've had a request come in, and it was along the lines of, we want to hear about some of your stories. Good and bad, and we've had, I can tell you, a lot of bad times and a lot of bad experiences, probably more so than the good. Fortunately, the good have been bigger than the bad, I think. So I think it's a valid request. So I think we can, I suppose that'll give people a bit of authenticity about who we are and that we're actually real people.
Yeah, that's it. Anyone can start a podcast, I suppose, but there's actually got to be a story behind it and like some kind of experience, I suppose, to offer any real value.
Yeah, defo. So one of the things that strikes me about both a negative and a positive lesson, well, negative experience to begin with, positive response to it, and therefore lesson learnt in the end. And I used to talk about this a little bit when I used to be a regular networker and do, these speaking slots and things like that. And that experience was, I had quite a toxic client for a while. But at the time we were very small as an agency. I think this is even before you joined the company, Sam. And we had this one client who was a bit of an ogre, very demanding, spent a decent amount of money with us at the time. I think it was like 60 grand a year on average, maybe. I can't remember exactly. I've kind of written that off out of my life. But they spent a significant amount of money, and they made up a decent portion of our income at the time. And so I was very nervous about dealing with them, and it got to the point where it was almost bullying tactics. I need this and I need this by Friday this week, and it was unreasonable. Squeezing us on cost and things like that, and so and I think that filters through, doesn't it? It puts your mindset in a really bad place. You're unable to.
It throws you off completely, because like when you throw those demands in, I suppose first couple of times you probably let it slide without questioning. It's just a bit last minute, like we'll get it done. But then you've kind of opened the door for haven't you? So you've let them do it once, they've got away with it, they'll just keep trying. And I guess I don't know whether some people do it intentionally, but they'll just keep testing you, won't they? And once they can push you so far, they'll just keep pushing and pushing. Yeah. And I suppose there's got to be a breaking point, hasn't it, before. I mean, because obviously if you prioritize them over everyone else and it messes up your diary and stuff like that, it's ruining the business at the end of the day, as well as, like you say, the mental stress of it all.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, and that the problem is then that affects the performance for the other clients as well. If you're constantly jumping for one client, and, you're going to miss the trick on some of the others. So that was, this was going on for a little while. And then in the end, I think I'd sent quite a grumpy email to the MD and said, oh, look, it's not very fair, I'm not very happy about it. You're squeezing us in all corners. And then, we're getting late payments, it's got to be some give and take. And in the end, he sent one back saying, "Oh, you know, I can't remember the exact wording actually, and I probably shouldn't say it just so that it can't be identified." You'd struggle to identify the business now anyway because they're not with us anymore. So, so they you know, I got quite a grumpy email off the MD, and we decided we'd part ways. And at that point, bricking it, you know, thinking, crap, that's a big chunk of money we've got to make up. You know, we were a very small business. The margins were tight at that time, and so but got my head down, but got networking, sent out a few feelers to a few people, and lo and behold, I think within 4 weeks we'd managed to replace the entire income that we'd lost on this one negative client. And you know, that so it had gone from a negative experience to then realizing that actually you can't allow clients to dictate yourselves. And there's another reason why I'm talking about this now, is that there's going to be a lot of businesses who have tighter margins now. They've got maybe less customers, and a lot of them will be nervous about making a decision to get rid of a client. But the lesson I learned from that is that actually one of the most important things in business is to learn when you've got to let a client go. And it sounds anti-business, doesn't it? But in reality, it's necessary.
And it frees you up, because that one client, obviously, like you say, within 4 weeks was replaced. It looks good on paper with the money coming in, but the headspace that was taking up, the distraction I had from, you know, all the business development and stuff like that, as soon as they were gone, it freed you up to go out and look for the right kind of customers.
Yeah.
So yeah,
absolutely.
I suppose it's looking at the bigger picture, isn't it?
Yeah. And some of those clients that we won at the time, still with us today, you know, probably 7 or 8 years on from when that was. So, you know, incredible sort of lesson in business. And I used to be quite controversial in the talks that I used to do. They'd be titled "Why You Should Fire Your Clients," you know, something along those lines. But it was one of the biggest lessons that I've learned in business. And now, generally speaking, when we do get a toxic client, we've learned to identify it quickly. We can usually identify them at quoting stage, so they don't even get onto our books. But every so often, you might get one that slipped through the net, and we're strong enough now to turn around and say no, and thank you very much. So, you know, and we're so fortunate, Sam, aren't we? In that, you know, that we really enjoy working with our clients. You know, our clients like us, we like them. You know, we're a partnership at the end of the day, and that all comes from that one lesson with this one bad experience. And at the time, it could have been endgame for us. It might have been plus 24 is no more.
Yeah. But, no, it's a massive lesson, and like you say, that kind of sets up who we work with now and the type of people you choose to work with, so that when we're quoting or when we're going out for business, you get to know that client or potential client, establish a relationship, and if it doesn't feel right before you start working together, it's not going to feel right when you do. Yeah. So yeah, like you say, have that confidence to walk away at the early stage rather than just being desperate for any type of business, because it could do more harm than good longer term.
Absolutely. Yeah, really. So yeah, that's my first. I'm sure there'll be many more stories and sort of looking back about our learnings over previous years in the next weeks and months of this podcast. So do get your requests in if you've got any thoughts around what you want to hear about experience wise. But another one that came in today, Sam, is they wanted to know. And this is a long one, right? So we might string this one out over a few podcasts. But why did we get into what we do and where we come from? And since I've spoken enough, Sam, why don't you tell us a bit about your journey? I'm particularly interested, you know, kind of on firstly why you got involved in what you did, then your university journey, because that's quite an interesting journey, and then obviously that'll lead you up to the time in Plus 24.
Yeah, I'll abridged version to keep it brief. But yeah, I went to uni to study business and management. Always something I was interested in all through school. It was my strong kind of area. So yeah, I ended up at uni in Lincoln studying business and management. And then while I was there,
why Lincoln?
Pardon?
Why Lincoln?
It just felt it was a growing university, shooting up the rankings. I think it's just got into the top 10. I mean, a few years after I left, but just going to the top 10. And yeah, it's just a nice community feel to it and a nice city. So yeah, was there for 3 years, but even in the first year, I knew that the course wasn't going to have the outcomes that I wanted in terms of the experience. It was setting you up for a corporate life. And I think it was perfect in terms of getting you onto like a grad scheme or something like that. But that's never what I wanted. I always wanted to feel part of something and, kind of build something rather than just being a number in a massive organization. So in first year, set up my first business or first proper business after the stuff you do as kids.
I'm intrigued. What sort of businesses did you have as a kid?
Well, at school and stuff, he used to sell ice pops, and we.
I thought you were going to say fags then.
No, there were plenty of kids that made a lot more money than me selling fags, but no, ice pops was my honest start at business and entrepreneurship. So no, this business at uni, we worked with some great clients. We started with like Lincolnshire Cooperative, and we were kind of doing market research for them, and then that led into marketing and training, particularly down the social media route. And this basically grew over the next few years. So all through the last couple of years of uni, we were running this social media business, training businesses, but then also managing it for them. And that just grew. We had clients all across the UK. And it was only a small business, but it gave us some great experience. We balanced it with our uni work. And we continued it for a year or so after university. And that just kind of set us up on a perfect footing. We had to learn how to run a business day to day, how to keep clients happy, obviously keeping up to date on all the latest digital marketing stuff. So yeah, that was a great introduction to it. And then as I was networking in the Northwest, so I was getting out and about trying to build that business. So obviously where I stumbled across you, and 6 years later, here I am.
You've never been able to escape since.
That's it, yeah. Met you at some kind of networking event, wasn't it? And then, yeah, that was it.
And I think one thing that obviously we work with a lot of young people through our apprenticeship program, and one thing that you see two sorts of young people, and you've got the really ambitious go-getters, and then you've got the ones who, and by the way, there's nothing wrong with either or. And then you've got the ones who are a bit more steady. They want to take the time and work their way into something. And you've got those go-getters who literally want to be a millionaire as soon as they've finished their apprenticeship. You were obviously one of those who wanted to be a millionaire straight out of uni, setting up your own business, selling ice pops at school. Firstly, let's deal with those go-getters. What advice could you give them? You're now a successful businessman. You're a shareholder of Plus24. You've grown your career, but quite quickly, but at a manageable pace. Some could say you've done it all. You could retire now, right?
Pretty much, yeah. Like coming up to my late 20s, so that'll do for me.
But no, what advice would you give to those go-getters coming out of college or uni, wanting to set up a business straight away? Certainly wouldn't discourage them, but what advice can you give them?
I think the biggest thing for something like that is find a mentor or a group of mentors, someone to look up to and that's been there and done it, because it's admirable that you can go out and set up straight away, and particularly if you've got like big ambitions to take on the world, but you don't know everything at that stage. Like the passion and enthusiasm is amazing, but there's other people that have kind of gone through the struggles and done everything that you're going to have to do, so they'll make your life a lot easier and probably help you avoid making mistakes. And that's what we did. That's how we kind of got our first foot in the door. Like as I started the business at uni, it was through networking with other local business people, and we met one guy in particular, Paul, who introduced us to a load of different people. We met a guy that was on Dragon's Den, and that just kind of opened your eyes to the opportunities, and they can ultimately like mentor you and advise you as you're getting started to keep you on the right path, ideally.
Yeah, amazing. I think that's a top bit of advice, that anybody who comes out uni and wants to start their own business, I would absolutely encourage them to do so. You need to do your research and all that other stuff, but we'll leave that kind of startup advice to another podcast. But the point that you've picked there is, find a mentor. It can save you years of pain. These people have likely been through the challenges that, and can help you avoid some of the mistakes that perhaps they made. I've had countless mentors or coaches over time. And it's quite often that, you might retain mentors for life, or you might, but some of the mentors might only be a mentor for a certain part of your life where, and actually this is a really difficult thing to say, but you might outgrow some of your mentors. And you've got to learn when, how I talked about in the last podcast about making up your own mind, and this is the same advice for mentors. Mentors will save you a lot of pain, but you also have to learn to make your own decisions. They can prod you and point you in the right direction and ask you good questions, but ultimately it has to be your own decision. You've got to go with your gut instinct.
Yeah, that's it. And it's just trying to make the most of that experience, isn't it? And that advice along the way.
And obviously keep listening to this podcast, because this podcast is going to give you loads of advice that you could use in your new startup venture.
Exactly. Yeah, it's pretty much mentoring as we go.
Yeah, and when you've got a decent marketing budget, they can come and utilize your services, Sam.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what we're here for at the end of the day.
Happy days. So that's really interesting, and I thought it was a really interesting inquiry to come in, because I guess I assumed that everybody that listened to this would be, well, mum, dad, maybe my brother occasionally, your dad, and maybe a few of the team. So I assumed they'd all know us, but fortunately we have had a few listeners, which is quite exciting. So we will maybe do a bit more background stuff moving forward and tell a few more journey stories and things like that. But yeah, so I think it's probably running short on a bit on time to give my journey, or the early part of my journey. So we'll pick up that on another podcast at some time soon, I guess.
Yeah, and I think obviously off the back of this, it'd be interesting to hear other people's stories, like what's been one of their biggest learning points in their business life so far.
Definitely. The other thing that I think we ought to just ask people for is, at some stage we are going to invite guests onto the podcast. Who would you like to hear from? What kind of businesses? What kind of industries? What sort of level do you want to hear from? Uber successful multi-billionaires, or do you want to hear some people who are still working on the journey? Startups, tech companies. What do people want to hear? And hopefully one day in the not too distant future we'll do this from one studio, because I think that'll make it a hell of a lot easier when we get to that point. Yeah,
hopefully not too far away.
Yeah, cool. All right, sound. Well, thanks everybody. If you've got this far for listening, really appreciate it. If you haven't, then you don't mind me calling you a prat. So thanks for listening. Hope to catch some of you next week.
Great. See you later.
Cheers, Sam. Bye.